Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Homeowner Association cut down all of my trees, massive mistake. Don't mess with my property. I've always been a relatively quiet person, so when I was pushed to exact a year-long mission of revenge against my HOA, I had simply had enough. I was an only child, raised by two military professionals who were very strict and full of strong moral values and hard work. I am a pretty smart, I'm humble and rarely mention that, and hardworking person. I busted my ass to get to where I am now. I graduated from high school a year early and went straight to college. From there I immediately jumped into medical school. I was the youngest person in my class of med school grads. After years of residencies and experience, I built my way up to being a very prestigious orthopedic surgeon, even opening my own practice. I managed to save up a lot of money and started the process of purchasing my first real house. I found a truly beautiful home, surrounded by woods in a handsome and well-kept neighborhood. It had tall ceilings, great landscaping and most of all a thick and luscious growth of trees and plants behind the home past the main area of the backyard. Several yards of this wooded area were still mine according to the property line that I had professionally marked before moving in. The neighborhood was only about 1/3 of the way finished and was relatively new, but several of the homes in the front were occupied. I purchased a home that was further back into the neighborhood, closer to the construction. It didn't take but a week or two of living there before I started receiving these shitty letters from the HOA for the silliest problems. One of them was that there were some small weeds growing in front of the mailbox. Later that same week, they sent a letter saying that the house was painted the wrong color. I was the first person to live here, how is that possible? When I was building the home and given the list of paint options, were they not already approved by the HOA? Absolutely ridiculous. So, I had to pay for the home to be repainted. Which, it's a big-ass house, so that was not cheap. After painting the home, I got yet another letter, this time stating that the mailbox was the wrong color now. What? Okay, so I painted that. But now it's the wrong style of mailbox. I was so confused at that point. Shortly after moving in, I decided to have some young pine trees planted along the border of my home facing the house to my left. I was trying to create some divide among the properties without putting up a fence. I just thought it would look nicer. No surprise, I was sent another letter. They hated the trees apparently and said that they needed to be removed. I was busy and didn't really have a lot of time to have them removed properly. I was hoping that if I called the company that planted them that maybe they could take them out without killing them. Perhaps I could even get some money back because trees are actually wicked expensive. Having all 8 of those young pine trees planted cost me around $45,000. Less than 48 hours had passed since they told me to remove the pine trees. I woke up to the sound of chainsaws at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. What the hell is that? The HOA had taken it upon themselves to remove the trees for me and hired a crew of 5 guys to just come out and cut them all down. I was beyond pissed. I barely had time to put on some sleeping pants before I ran outside with no shoes or shirt. I shouted at them to stop what they're doing and they informed me that they were hired by the HOA to do this task and that they were told not to listen to me. I was shaking with anger. The level of disrespect. Why are these assholes harassing me? I just don't understand what is going on. Not only am I just blatantly sick of their shitty attitudes towards me and my home, but I feel like it's borderline bullying after a point. I've always been told that there's not much point in fighting an HOA in court. I know that there have been plenty of people who have won against shameful HOAs, but I just feel like it'd be a bigger waste of time and money. So why not get some revenge in a different way? I started looking into our state's HOA laws and policies and read up on the paperwork I had signed when purchasing the home. According to all of the information that I dug up, this HOA is one that can only stay standing if over 50% of the neighborhood agrees to it. This could work. I am only one of I think about 15 residents. So maybe if I just buy up some of the unsold homes, I can make me the majority owner and disband these evil duckers. I set my plan in motion and joined forces with a real estate buddy of mine, getting the ball rolling on my ultimate revenge. I started purchasing the homes one by one before they even came out onto the market. so I didn't attract their attention with the same name on each property. I was using alias names or the names of my businesses. It was certainly a sketchy situation to be in at the time, but well worth the risk. Meanwhile, even as I'm scooping up these homes, I couldn't help but be sick of the HOA harassing me regularly. It even got to a point where I wasn't staying at the house anymore because I was so goddamn tired of their letters and fees for the smallest things every week. The pettiest fine I think I've gotten had to be the tiny weeds in the flower beds or in front of the mailbox. Like, how are they even seeing these little clovers that are popping up in the flower beds? They even fined me for putting up a flag supporting my college's football team because it wasn't an approved flag. It took me nearly a year to purchase enough homes to get my perfect revenge. The main, annual HOA meeting arrived and a few people, I'm assuming, were having similar issues with feeling harassed and constantly watched. Many of them expressed the same issues of concern regarding the petty fees and excessive fines for the tiniest things. The board members continued to have this air of, "We're better than all of you," bullshit, and just casually moved on from one issue to the next without ever answering anything. By the end of it all, I was even more sick of these assholes than I had been originally, which is really a tough task because I disliked them pretty badly. There was a clear air of frustration and anger among the residents at the meeting, and I was not disappointed by their reaction when I busted out my ultimate revenge. My papers were in a folder, full of the deeds and other documents needed to prove that I owned enough homes in the neighborhood to tell them to pound sand. I spoke up and opened my folder but couldn't even get one word out as the lead board member cut me off. He began saying that the meeting was finished at this point and there wasn't enough time to hear me out. I looked at the clock and saw that there was another 10 minutes till the hour, so I chose to ignore him. I actually would like to take a vote on the board members while we have so many residents here. The board's faces turned towards me, looking pale and confused. It's January, which according to the documents I signed when purchasing my home, this is when we vote on the board members. Is it not? They continued to seem confused and even the lead member started stuttering. I don't think that's right, he said as he shifted awkwardly in his seat. Oh, but it is. I made direct eye contact with this man and continued to remove the deeds from the homes I've purchased and laid them on the table before me. As a matter of fact, I'd like to vote that the HOA board be disbanded. An immediate surge of murmurs erupted from the other residents and several people started chiming in and agreeing with me. The entitled folks behind their long desk couldn't believe it. "Sir, there's no way for you to disband us. The vote is only for choosing board members, not deciding if the HOA stays together." They started rising from their chairs to leave when I told them I wasn't finished. "Actually, you're wrong. If a majority owner decides that the HOA should be disbanded, then they have no choice." The leader in the middle laughed but stopped quickly when he saw all of the dozens of papers in front of me. "Here's all of the deeds to the houses that I own in this neighborhood, making me the majority owner. Therefore, I want the HOA disbanded. Today, you would have thought that I just won the Super Bowl." Dozens of residents cheered and came to pat me on the back in congratulations for defeating the big, bad HOA. The fact that there were this many people wanting to get rid of them when the neighborhood had only been established for a year is ridiculous. That just goes to show you that if you want to be a fucking tyrannical HOA, you should expect someone to stand up to you at some point. You can't just abuse power and think that people will sit idly by as you harass them and make their lives a frustrating mess. To this day, I have sold those extra revenge homes I purchased, except for mine of course, and live happily in my beautiful house that is no longer governed by some shitty, power-hungry HOA board. The next story is titled, "Neighbor is Trying to Acquire a Strip of My Property Through Adverse Possession, Tennessee." I purchased a house in Tennessee last June 2019. One of the main things I planned on doing was installing a privacy fence since I am next to a busy street and there is a lot of foot traffic on the sidewalk. I got a fence contractor out in September to measure the corners of the lot. When I showed them where the plat on the official government records were, my neighbor came out and tried to tell me it was their portion of the lawn. Though I disagreed, I decided to wait for the fence and get a survey done. It took a lot longer to get a property surveyor than I originally expected, and finally got it finished in May. The survey showed that I was correct. After trying to disprove the survey and failing, my neighbor is suing for a 12 feet by 50 feet strip of land using adverse possession. Their thought is that since they have been caring for the land for 20 years that it is now theirs. They have not paid tax on the strip of land and have no structures on it. Do they have a fair claim to the land? Update. Thank you for everyone that originally replied. We followed the original advice to get our title company to help with the case, but they ended up not helping. We had to hire a lawyer and the whole process took over 2 years due to COVID delay. Several of the cited cases were used in our case. Over 2 years ago my household was served with an adverse possession claim by my neighbor. The dispute began 3 months after we purchased our home. We had to go to court, which ended up being 2+ years after being served. The judge ruled in our favor. Some details about the case. The neighbor was able to prove that they had mowed the piece of property for 20 years, which we did not and could not dispute. They had landscapers testify of the constant boundaries maintained in their contracts. Our verbal dispute over the property line occurred 19 years and 363 days after our neighbor moved into their property, meaning the 20-year adverse possession window would not work. The piece of property was considered relatively small, because it is a part of a residential property. This proved to be the strongest element to win us the case. In Tennessee there is precedent that when the property is relatively small, the property cannot be claimed via adverse possession, if even structures are on the property. Lastly, while proving they had mowed the lawn, they could not prove that they had exclusive use over the land. This is one of the strict bright line tests of Tennessee adverse possession that the neighbor could not prove. The next story is titled, Neighbor Thinks They Own My Driveway. I have had this go-dofful neighbor for the last 2 years, who is nothing but a pain in my ass. I only have one car but like to park at the front of my driveway, fully in my property boundaries, so that I can easily direct my dogs to the car boot, quickly access the car if I have to shoot off, etc. For 2 years I have been keeping my car further in as an inconvenience to myself because this crazy woman 2 doors down would demand access to my driveway so she can get to reverse park on hers, because she is too lazy to turn around in the morning. After a recent event where my car was in front of my house rather than the driveway, emergency, had to rush my dog into the vets as he was gravely injured, she texted me to demand why it was there and that she couldn't use my drive. I decided no longer am I being nice to her, so I parked just within my boundary. She went insane, first trying to guilt trip, next with anger. She is a full Karen in entitlement mode. The next story is titled, Charging Me for Something Extra That Never Existed? Fine, I'll pretend like it did. I was using a storage company to keep my stuff over the summer, and they already fudged up the first part of the delivery, so I wasn't having high hopes for the time when I was supposed to get my stuff back. I had sent 7 boxes to the company but received a quote for 8 boxes instead, and the surplus they charged on it was quite a lot. I wrote to them asking why there's this extra box and they never replied to me to say that they'd look into it or to cancel the charges for the 8th box that didn't exist. I called them every week and the line was bogged up every time, and emailed them near every day because the situation was just so stressful. They kept saying the extra charge was because I stored an extra box and they can't do anything about it, despite me being explicitly clear in all my correspondence that there was no 8th box. Now that they've asked for confirmation that I received all my boxes, I said that after 2 months, I still haven't received the final box. I got my delivery charges refunded as a goodwill gesture, not that I would go back to them ever. But the satisfaction now lies in the idea they are tramping around the warehouse trying to find a box that doesn't exist. If they still haven't found the non-existent box by month 3, I might just as well demand reimbursement for no loss on my part, aside from the extreme annoyance I suffered throughout this unpleasant ordeal. Edit. I'm so happy that there are people who can find catharsis in unfortunate situations like this. It almost makes the stress of losing money to a faceless corporation worth it. On a side note, I really enjoyed you guys guessing what would be in the 8th box. I also am eager to know what it would be. Edit 2. I have no intention of committing insurance fraud. The last story is titled, Brother Ruined My Wedding by Proposing. So I ruined his proposal. I, 35 male, have a young brother, Todd, 29 male, who had a complicated birth and had to stay a month in the ICU, and because of that my parents have always doted on him and almost denied him nothing, even if it was to the detriment of my sister, Abby, 32 female. And my brother drinks in on the attention and has on more than one occasion made himself the center of attention at either my sister's, or a cousin's special event. Because of this, Abby and I have a strained relationship with Todd and our parents. Unfortunately, Todd met and fell in love with Lucy, 24 female, who announced her own pregnancy at the baby shower my mom held for Abby. When I proposed to my wife, Michelle, 30 female, I just wanted to elope, but she really wanted her family to be there, so I invited my family out of obligation. While out, my best man, Jim, 35 male, noticed a receipt from a jewelry store slipped out of Todd's pocket. Jim confronted Todd about this, which led to an argument. Jim told me everything and I told Todd that he was no longer going to be a groomsman because I knew he was going to propose at my wedding. Todd cried to our parents, and which led to a blowout. In my parents' eyes, since Todd never admitted that he was going to propose to Lucy at my wedding, I was unfairly judging him. I refused and brought up Todd's past behavior. My parents couldn't refute this and got Todd to agree to not try anything at my wedding. This wasn't enough to convince me to let him be a groomsman, but I warned him that if, as a guest, he'd try anything I would make him regret it. Fast forward to the wedding and surprise, Todd walked over to Lucy and proposed to her during Michelle's father-daughter dance and did it in a way so that everyone would notice. Cue my revenge. Jim and I had hired a woman to pretend to be Todd's side piece who cornered Todd and Lucy and claimed that she was pregnant with his baby. Todd denied this, but when she called his phone, I gave her his number and messed with Todd's phone to incriminate him. It didn't look good. Lucy threw the ring back at Todd and left in tears. When Todd saw the smile on my face, he knew that it was me, and I didn't respond to a single call/text from him or my parents until after the honeymoon. Lucy has thrown Todd's stuff out and has been denying access to their kid. Todd is furious and is demanding that I clear his name. I sent him a text saying that I had no idea what he was talking about, as well as a screenshot of a bill for the wedding, and gave a vague message demanding reimbursement for half of the wedding costs. Michelle knew the whole time what I was planning and gave me the green light after Todd ruined her moment with her dad, so I felt pretty good, but now even Abby thinks I went too far. Thank you for listening.